Welcome, listeners and viewers, to another episode of Ulab Central. Today, I'm joined with John. And John, would you like to tell our audience why they should be excited about our conversation today?
Yeah, it's interesting. It almost feels like I'm bragging or whatever, but I think the reason people should listen to me is I've had a decent amount of success in business. I started my career in real estate, just selling residential real estate. I was 22 and the market was doing really well. And candidly, when I got my license, I sort of was thinking this was just a temporary measure while I figured out what I really wanted to do, but I ended up really loving it. And, in residential real estate, what I found pretty quickly is that, the basic process of selling a home and, completing the paperwork, working with attorneys is pretty straightforward and simple. So where you really excel and where you can really, make a name for yourself is just through an incredible client experience. So just doing things just a little bit better than your competition. And so I ended up falling in love with real estate, which led me to, I actually changed companies around 2008 and joined up with what became my business partner, Mark Spain. And over the next 15, 16 years, we grew that real estate team and scaled it up and actually had a private equity exit in 2021. What was interesting about that is we were able to get a multiple valuation on our EBITDA that, at least from what we could see, had never really been accomplished for a residential real estate company. And the reason for that is we were quite different than your typical residential real estate team. And what I would say is we truly ran it like a business. And I don't mean to disparage other real estate companies when I say that, but what I mean is traditional real estate brokerages are really a platform for agents. So the agents pay some fees to the company, a portion of their commission, and they get all this technology and service. So it's focused on the customer, but at the end of the day, the business sort of exists to support agents, and then the agents support the customer. At Mark Spain Real Estate, we were all about the customer. So we did a marketing, radio, television, billboards, attracted leads to us. Then we built out an inside sales team that would follow up with those leads. And by the way, towards after a couple of years of building out that department, we were calling leads within 22 seconds of filling out a form on our website. So we really optimized a lot of our systems and processes to maximize our conversions. And so that's what led to that, valuation that, is typically not achieved with residential real estate companies when they trade. So from there, I transitioned over to Faris Capital Partners, where I'm currently working. I'm a co-founder and I have equity in the business. And we are buying apartment buildings. So raising capital from investors to acquire apartment buildings that are, say, maybe undermanaged or maybe being underutilized. So we'll go in with our investors' capital. We put money into the deals as well, and we renovate those buildings, raising the value through increasing the rents. So it's interesting and fun to be sort of still in real estate, but in a whole different kind of category and asset class. So having a lot of fun scaling and growing this business. So we have about 150 million in assets under management so far, with goals to raise an additional 250 million in the next 10 years. So got a big road ahead of us, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So I would say, kind of from a why someone should listen to me, I know I just answered that very in a long way. A lot of my success came through, one, having great mentors along the way that taught me a lot about leadership, more specifically what I would say is servant leadership. So that idea of really, being the tip of the spear and being willing to do whatever you're asking your team to do, hiring great people, taking great care of them, all those things. So that's what I'm really passionate about. And I feel that leadership is sorely missing in our world today.
Yeah.
Particularly, I would say people first leadership.
Yeah. So thanks for that. I mean, it's really sets the tone for what we're going to touch upon today. I mean, in the whole information that you gave, I want to touch upon a few terms that you specifically tagged on. Client experience, increasing that, the multiples that you got in your business. Then about servant leadership, I think you love to talk about that, and basically all around leadership, right? So first, let's
Yes.
talk about client experience, right? I mean, how important, I mean, it's the core thing that runs every business, right? be you could be selling an apple, but still you need that client experience thing, right? So do you want to tell us something about how you created that client experience and how you're currently doing that with your current business?
Yeah, no doubt. So I would say that what I've observed is often the difference between a good and an exceptional client experience is about 5% more effort.
Yes.
So, it's the idea that your product is delivering most of the value. So whether that's, residential real estate services being the product or a literal product, a widget or whatever you're selling, that's what people are buying. They're buying that service, they're buying that product for that value. And so, where I find that a lot of people miss is just in the small details. So, for example, maybe after a phone call with a client, you follow up with a short recap email saying, "Hey, so great to connect. Here's what we discussed. Here's my action item." So, like in a service, environment where maybe my seller of a home that I'm selling, is concerned about a new listing in the area. I'm going to do a little research. So I'm going to recap that and say, "Hey, I'm going to go in, I'm going to call this agent, I'm going to find out what I can. I'll give you a shout back by tomorrow." So, never over promise and under deliver. Those types of things. Gosh, sending handwritten notes is one of the easiest, simplest things, and it's such a lost art. What I find is that, for example, I have a lender that I've done a lot of business with over the years, and I've been out of residential real estate now for 3 years, and I still get birthday cards, holiday cards, follow-up emails from him. And so when I'm at a soccer game with my kid and someone goes, "Oh, I'm thinking of buying a house," I'm like, "You got to talk to Daryl because this guy, man, he sends, and so it's just that staying top of mind, but just those little things that surprise and delight and wow. um Being over communicative in a sense where you're always looping your customer or client in on what's happening. And then I would say, backing up just a little bit, when you first get that customer, whatever the product or service is, really being thoughtful about the onboarding experience. So we would have printed materials that were, in nice folders, not just like some cheap folder we bought at Office Depot, but glossy with our logo on them. And it would basically be a roadmap and checklist for everything they needed to expect through the process. We had an admin team that would help assist for the, photography and all those things. They would call and follow up and just make sure everything was scheduled to the seller's satisfaction. And then I would say the biggest thing too, beyond what I've already mentioned, is just closing the loop. And so years and years ago, I was actually at an event where the Ritz Carlton was presenting about their client experience. And the Ritz Carlton, as you know, has a reputation for one of the best client experiences in the world, right? I always say, like, the Holiday Inn could be right next door and could be a fifth or tenth of the cost, but people will still choose the Ritz if they can afford it for that service. At the end of the day, they're both selling a bed and a pillow, but the Ritz Carlton, people are willing to pay a lot more.
Yeah.
And this little story came to mind because this is how the Ritz Carlton teaches customer service in the close the loop culture. So I think it's relevant for any business. So they basically said, if the building engineer is on their way down the hall to go take a look at the HVAC system, and as they're walking, a door opens up and someone sticks their head out the door and says, "Hey, can you maybe get me a few extra towels, please?" This is the building engineer, right? So not really his responsibility, but the Ritz Carlton would say that building engineer needs to go to housekeeping, make sure that customer's request was met. Those towels, hey, room 303 needs towels. Then he needs to verify that those towels were actually delivered to room 303. So no, okay, check, that's been done. And then he needs to go back to room 303 and say, "Hey, I just wanted to make sure you got those towels." And so, the housekeeper took care of it, right? Or the lead of housekeeping took care of it, but he still has to go back and he knows the answer. He knows it's already happened, but just to say, "Hey, did you get those towels? Just wanted to make sure you were well taken care of." And so if you thought about your business and how you interact with customers and you implemented that style of sort of closing the loop, you'd be shocked at how that kind of solves for most everything. People just want to be heard. They want to understand that their challenges have been, inputted and that they're going to be taken care of. And so, like I said, it's really in the small details. It's like that 5% additional effort. In other words, the Ritz Carlton could say, "Well, the towels got delivered, problem solved, just go down and fix the HVAC." But that little extra step just shows the customer that they really care. And that's what it's all about. Just showing the person that you care, being authentic, being real, and listening.
Now, in this whole experience, right, I think the team also plays a great role, right? And mentoring that team and training that team to actually behave in that way. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand yeah, the values have to be instilled, but then the team has to be constantly trained in that into that mentality that your job is this, but the customer comes first. So I guess
Yeah.
that is something that happens, right? Now,
Yes.
since we're talking about teams, we can talk about leadership. And you mentioned something called servant leadership. Now, I don't fully understand. I don't know if my audience also understands, but so could you put some light on it?
Yeah, so servant leadership is really the idea that the leader's job is to make the team most effective through clearing the decks. So that's sort of a boating term, but just making sure there's no obstacles in the way if you reach rough seas, right? Nothing that's going to swing over and knock somebody off the side of the boat. So, how I think about that is being thoughtful when we first start the company and along the way to have systems and processes to make things easier to get done, make sure that everybody has clear accountability. So it's this idea that in some companies, there's this overall mission, but nobody knows who's responsible for which part of it. So, being very clear on, quarterly priorities and daily metrics that that person owns, and then giving them the ability through that ownership to make decisions that are not going to be slowed down by you. So, for example, our marketing director, Sristi Raha, she's a genius when it comes to marketing. And so when we meet, we talk through maybe an idea or maybe I read an article, but I don't sit there and say, I need you to go do this, this, and this. The bottom line is her numbers will tell the story. So if in other words, our, cost per lead is going down, our social media following is going up, and, the leads are converting into business, then I don't need to be in her way, granularly asking a billion questions and questioning every little decision. Now that's not to say I'm not watching and I'm seeing every ad that's going out. I'm providing some feedback along the way, but it's just saying like, what do you need from me, Shristي, so you can generate those leads? What resources, right? So sometimes she'll come to me and say, John, I need you to record 25 videos this week that we can deploy across social media. And I say, you got it. So it's that idea that she can request of me things, right? Just the same as I can from her, even though I'm
Yeah.
technically her boss. So it's a collaborative team effort. But I think it's important to layer in, right? So we have weekly same page meetings with each team member where we're reviewing all the metrics. I'm providing feedback. I would say that's another thing that I would say is super important with servant leadership is that feedback is bidirectional. So, a great example, I'll use Shristي again because I love her, but she will tell it like it is. And so, I was doing a podcast for our company the other day and she called me up and she said, John, you looked a little tired on that one, maybe have a cup of coffee before your next one. I was like, geez, kind of hurt my feelings for a second, but then I was like, she was right. I kind of rushed into the appointment. I had a back-to-back meeting. And so what I started doing is putting 30 minutes buffer before we record a podcast just so I can do some breathing and get my mind right, maybe have an espresso or whatever. And so it goes back to nobody's above the mission. And I think that's really what it boils down to. So what I would say, and this is sort of a small example, but we own these apartment buildings, as I mentioned, and we had just hired a new property manager. We walk onto the property. We're doing kind of like a quarterly visit. And I'm walking around and I'm just seeing like some cigarette butts on the ground and some candy wrappers blowing around. And so I just had a grocery bag in my car. And so I just grabbed it, a little plastic bag, and just started picking everything up. And so I was able to then use that as a learning and teaching opportunity for this new PM. So I didn't go in there and scream and yell and say, man, this place looks like crap. What's the deal? I just said, hey, when I came to the property, I noticed some cigarette butts around unit 303. I just sort of picked them up. But what I'd love for you to do going forward, because I know you're new here, is it's very important that our properties just are pristine,
Yeah.
so when a new potential resident comes through, they just have an exceptional experience. So I'd love for you to work with a maintenance supervisor, maybe create a schedule where you guys alternate and walk the property every morning just to ensure there's no trash. And she was like, oh, that's fantastic idea. We'll get that implemented. So instead of being mad about it, I just
Yeah.
sort of said, hey, this is a teachable opportunity. Now, if this was like year 3 and, the person was dropping the ball, it's a little bit of a different conversation. But, I illustrate that because it's that idea. I'm not above picking up the trash either, right? We all should be willing to do this. And so it's doing what, never asking somebody to do something you're unwilling to do yourself. I'll add to that too, because you mentioned the values earlier when you were asking the question, and I think those are so important. But what we've done as well is we've taken it a step further and we've created what we call the fundamentals. So there are 35 behaviors that actually tie back to our values. And so on a daily basis in our morning huddle, we review one of those fundamentals.
Mhm.
And so, for example, one of them is show up on time. And as we write out the description of that, it's like, hey, when you have an investor meeting, you need to make sure you're on time for that Zoom meeting. If you have an appointment, you're showing up 15 minutes early. And so at the end of the day, if I was late to huddles or late to the same page meetings, then I've just given everybody else permission to do the same.
Yeah.
So those fundamentals effectively apply more to me and my business partner, Mark, than the rest of the team, because the second we slip, then everybody sees it and they say, well, obviously that doesn't matter and it's not important. So I think it's really critical for entrepreneurs and business owners as they're building and scaling a team to understand that whatever they do, the team's going to follow. So, if they want to culture a certain way, they have to live and breathe that exact behavior if they expect everybody else to do the same.
Uh, Now, this might sound like a little silly question or probably
No.
cynical, but yeah, you mentioned 35 fundamentals. So how does your team exactly remember all of them? I mean, I
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not a bad question at all. In fact, it's actually something you have to be very intentional about. So I
yeah,
mentioned before on the morning huddle, we review one.
yeah,
So, every 35 business days,
yeah. Every month
we're,
you'll
we're
be,
cycling through
yeah.
them. But that's not enough. So what we do in addition is I send out a Friday update email to the entire team.
Mhm.
Um, I include an update on maybe what's happening in the market, maybe a big win from the team. We use that as an opportunity to celebrate if somebody had a big milestone or got through a challenge. We say, Andrea had this, situation where an investor was very rude on the call initially, but she just listened and digested. And then before you know it, she turned the person around and now they're interested in investing. So just sharing those wins. But as I'm doing that, I'm highlighting those fundamentals and I actually put those in bold within the email. So I said, hey, Georgia really demonstrated a genuine love for people in bold. So that's one of those fundamentals. And, here's how she did it, which demonstrated, our fundamental of not over promising and under delivering in bold. So it's just one of those things. It's like it becomes part of my language. So whether it's in person or over a Zoom, and I'm just saying, hey, thanks so much for honoring that fundamental. But it's also in those emails. So it's something where you can't just create them and stick them in a file somewhere. You have to talk about them. You have to put them in emails. One thing I did at Mark Spain Real Estate, I haven't yet done, but it actually just came back to me because it's been a few years, is I actually would do a video on one of the fundamentals on a weekly basis, include it in that Friday update email because I sent that there as well. So I might actually implement that at Faris Capital because it slipped my mind. But it's just constant reinforcement. It's just talking about them every day on the huddle, bringing them up in emails when you're giving feedback. And then even further, when we do our quarterly reviews, I highlight fundamentals that the person's really owning and just crushing, right? So it's a constant reinforcement, I guess, to answer your question, whether through email, in-person conversation, in the morning huddles, just everywhere. Now, we're a fully remote company. If we weren't and we were in an office, we would have posters on the wall reminding everybody of these things. That's what we had at Mark Spain Real Estate. But we are remote at Faris Capital. So it's just, in conversation, in
Yeah.
email, in those daily huddles. So constant reinforcement.
So yeah, a constant reinforcement. And then this also is a very important part of leadership, right? Where you enforce ideas and then basically tell people that you're doing a good job, or and you give this message in the same tone that you're talking about when they say they've done a mistake, right? It has to be dealt with equally. And
That's right.
when you do that across emails or across conversations and try to enforce those ideas by minute, it gives
Yeah.
the idea that even the leadership is trying to show that they follow what they preach. So
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in those, to your point, when there's a miss, it's, hey, one of our fundamentals is this, and I think we fell a little short here. What can we do next time to ensure that we have a better experience for
Yeah.
our investor or for our vendor or whatever? Um, so yeah, it's just it's and you said sort of like the email. One of ours is pick up the phone. So what we mean by that is that we do not deliver bad or good news over
Yeah.
text message or email. We pick up the phone.
Mhm.
So, if there's maybe a challenge, sometimes people are having a bad day, right? And say
Right.
we're in the morning huddle and I'm like, man, somebody seems like they're a little bit off today. They're a little short, or maybe just, or maybe I could just see it in their face. Like, I'm going to pick up the phone and call them immediately. I have to say, hey, is everything okay? I just noticed things are a
Yeah.
little bit off. And
Mhm.
it's interesting because a lot of people don't like to do that because they feel like it's conflict. And sometimes people just didn't sleep great the night before, or maybe they got in a fight with their spouse or whatever, and it's just a temporary blip. But as you do that, it shows your team that you're paying attention, but also that you care. And so, man, it's been very cool how often people will then open up and say, well, this is what's happening. And it's like, I'm not a psychologist, but maybe I could point them towards a resource or something that could potentially help for them. So anyway, it's just one of those things where, it's all about, that constant reinforcement and, just living the fundamentals as the leader.
Even the leadership should be looking forward towards the mission, right? And
Yes.
probably at Faris Capital and in your previous company, you had a mission and probably a mantra that you followed yourself, right? And probably you wanted everyone else to follow. Do you have
Yeah.
something like that you've been following, or you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of my mantras is sort of how you do one thing is how you do everything. So, you know, I'm not immune to bad days myself, right? Some days you just, whatever, you just don't sleep good, you're tired and whatever. And so you can have that tendency to start to, slack a little bit. And so that constant reminder of how you do one thing is how you do everything. It just helps me get back into that mindset that, for me in my role particularly, but I would say just for anybody in life, you should be pursuing excellence. You're not going to reach it every day. It's really the pursuit that's meaningful.
yeah,
So, just shaking it off and saying, I have a job to do today, so I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I'm a big reader, and one of my favorite authors, Cormac McCarthy, he's only given like 2 interviews in his whole career. But the one he gave with Oprah, he just said, my goal every day is just to write one page better than the page I wrote the day before.
yeah,
And I just love the simplicity. It's just kind of a beautiful thought. It's just like, it's not about writing something that's 3,000 times better than the page
yeah.
you wrote before. It's just a little bit better, and if you do
Yes.
that every single day. And so Darren Hardy is somebody who I really like and appreciate. He's a business leader, consultant, coach, and talks about the compound effect of just 1% improvement on a daily basis, and you
Yeah.
continue to do that 1%. The way that compounds like interest in a a savings account is massive. And so, you know, and then if you have a bad day and maybe you were 5% off that day, getting back on track and getting that 1% better the next day, right? Never miss twice. That's another mantra of mine. It's like you can have a bad day today, but don't let tomorrow be a bad day as well. So, how you do one thing is how you do everything, and never miss twice is kind of my two go-to mantras.
I think we probably synced on this matter because you probably plucked that compounding idea off my mind. I was about to just mention that. So thanks
Yeah, I
for
love
mentioning
that.
that. So towards the next segment of our conversation, I want to talk a little about how you've been doing with social media, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I I observe that you are currently only active on LinkedIn, and I think it's probably the only relevant platform for you right now. But as a business, even personally or as a business as well, have you ever wondered that even in your marketing team, are they ever wondering about exploring other platforms, or do you have something on YouTube going out, or Instagram, TikTok, something of that sort?
Yeah, so yes, on YouTube. So it's actually under the company. So my business partner and I, we do 2 podcasts a week, all on the nuts and bolts of multifamily investing. So investing in apartments. We also talk about how we structure our team. Whether that's meeting cadences that we implement. But we are basically just getting started. We're, I think, about 42 episodes in. I think 38 have actually launched. So we're slowly building a following, which has been great. We actually have not been promoting it. We've been pushing it through our newsletter database. We have about 10,000 people in our database, so they're getting it. That's driving all the traffic. But over time, we'll start to implement a little bit more spend there to grow that audience. So from a company perspective, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, we're big on. It's interesting. I think I'm just old enough. Like, I'm 44, so Facebook, I didn't really even have a Facebook page until like my mid 20s, late 20s, and I actually was a late adopter. I kind of I don't know. I kind of tried the MySpace thing and just didn't get it. That's how old I am. And so with Facebook, man, what I found, and I think it was a product of the political system in the U.S., but about 10 years ago, it just turned into a lot of my old friends from high school and college just talking politics. And I'd go on there and it would just make me frustrated.
Right.
So on Instagram, I post a little bit on my stories. Instagram is really for my friends. I have an open account. People follow me on there, but I just use it to stay in touch with friends and, post pictures of my kids, for my friends and family. But LinkedIn has been a great resource, actually. So with LinkedIn, I need to improve. I'm getting better. But daily posting, commenting, and liking other people's comments. These algorithms. You have to work it, right? So with LinkedIn, if you're not liking and commenting on 6 to 8 other people's posts a day and posting daily, you'll have minimal reach. And so I'm getting better, but it's something I'm focusing a lot more attention on today and going forward. Because as you pointed out, it's a great source of potential investors for my company. So it's stretching my comfort zone a little bit because I am kind of a private, in a sense, individual. And by the way, I think too, part of my mental block, and it is a mental block, it's a limiting belief, but there's a lot of what I would say are charlatans out there on social media, people that have never really built or grown a company that are trying to sell you a system to help you get rich. And, I just don't want to be that person. So for
Right.
me, I really think through like business lessons, like real stories. And I say this, like, I'm not using AI to create my posts. And I think I've observed that quite a bit recently. I do use ChatGPT quite a bit in our business for various tasks. And so I can tell when something's written by ChatGPT because I use it. And
Yeah.
so, when I go on LinkedIn or Facebook and I see stuff and I'm like, yeah, that I know ChatGPT wrote that. It goes back to that charlatan fake stuff. So what I've been trying to do is sort of like, so I actually did this recently. I wrote down 100 lessons that I learned in a Google document while scaling and growing Mark Spain Real Estate and sort of starting up Faris Capital. So then creating content based on those concepts and those lessons. So it's definitely something I need to crank up a little bit more. And look, I have some friends that are, quote unquote influencers that have walked the walk and talked the talk, and they're providing great content. And I've seen the benefit they've gotten from it. So it's something I need to work on. Let's just put it that way. But LinkedIn is where I'm focusing most of my attention.
So yeah, because as I've been discussing this same thing with multiple people, right? LinkedIn has been a very good platform for especially business people and business persons, be it getting clients, be it getting connecting with investors, or just connecting with the business community to try to gauge the audience, what is the requirement or what the market is all about, and things like that. So it's working well for everybody in the corporate world, right?
Yeah.
And that's how things are. I mean, it's good that you've taken the first step of writing all the 100 lessons that you've learned. It is
Yeah.
one of the fundamental things that you need to do, because at least I don't know how many days you're going to post about it, but 100 lessons can be further be divided into 5 sub lessons, and then you can
Yeah.
create 500 posts. You have enough material to be putting out content for like 1.5 years already. So
Yeah.
good luck on that, I would say.
No, thank you. One thing I know I need to do too, and I'm a big believer in time blocking. So what I found is if I don't block the time for a task, it doesn't get done. So
Yeah.
maybe carving out a couple of hours on, say, Friday and writing all my posts for the next week and scheduling those to go
Yeah.
out, and then just having a 5-10 minute block every day just to go in and comment and like on, great insightful posts, because the algorithm picks up on that and starts serving your content to a wider audience, right? So yeah, you probably saw on there, I have some burst where there's 5 or 7 days of content, and there's nothing for a week. So actually this conversation has been really helpful because it's like a reminder, okay, like let's just do it. It's time to kind of lock in and get it done. So I'm going to block out that time as soon as we wrap up here on this call.
So thanks for that. I mean, I'm happy that I was able to give you a reminder on that little task that you have
Yeah, yeah.
on your chart. But thanks for joining in. Thanks for helping our audience get a better idea about what businesses are and then how they can be scaled, what client experiences are about, and how people are starting out on LinkedIn and what are the little things that they can be doing. Thank you for joining me in. To the listeners and viewers and to the audience, if you like the video and like the conversation, do leave a comment if you have something to ask. John, before I close this out, do you want our audience to reach out to you on a specific platform or if they want to know more about your business?
Yeah, I would say if you go to fulloutinvesting.com, that's FULLAUT investing.com, fulloutinvesting.com. It's a great resource. We actually have a video that walks you through exactly how apartment syndication investing works, and more specifically, how we approach it. There's a sample deal about what an investment would look like, but most importantly, you can book in a time. So you can book in a time to talk with me. So whether it's about leadership, and this is not a sales call. In other words, I know your listeners are here for leadership and influencing. So if you just want to talk about those topics, go ahead and book in that time. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just copy and paste my name into the LinkedIn, and there's not many John Makarewiczes out there, so you'll find me pretty quickly.
Thanks again. Thanks for joining in. To the listeners and viewers, you know what to do. If you like the video, give us a like. And if you like my channel, do subscribe. Thank you. Thanks for joining. Thanks, John.
My pleasure. Thanks.